Shall we begin? Let's begin now. Let's begin now.
What is up, everybody? Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. You're listening live to Rivals React Radio on this relaxing Tuesday afternoon. I am Lucas Rojas, as always, and this podcast can be heard on Spreaker.com. We're on YouTube, iTunes, and of course, everything we upload will be available for your download as soon as we go off the air. Joining me today is very special guest. He is a current writer at For the Win USA Today Sports and an author of book titled Strange Country Day. He is Charles Curtis, and you can follow him on Twitter at @ByCharlesCurtis. Charles, it's a pleasure to have you on, man. What's going on?
Happy to be with you. It's good speaking with you.
It is, and prior to us being on air, we were just talking about how convenient it is, certain schedules. That's why I threw in a little relaxing reference in there. But yes, it has been relaxing, and it's about to get even better being able to do this with you. And of course, I want to thank my former professor at the College of Westchester, Miss Noelle Delaco, for granting me the opportunity to connect with you in the first place. And, that's what brought us here, so big shout out to her. Actually, I guess we could probably start that off by you telling us a little bit about that connection between you and Delaco and how it kind of started off.
Oh, sure. Well, she, first of all, a huge shout out to her because she is the queen of connections. I always like to say, in terms of just like hooking everybody up in her wide network. I actually know Noelle through my wife. My wife and her grew up together, are friends, longtime friends. I think high school, if I'm not mistaken, or junior high school. I think, it was junior high school. And they've been friends for a very long time, and it's been great to connect with her and to see all the amazing things that she does, including being your professor and all the stuff she does with those prom dresses. It's just incredible, the kind of stuff she does. So great connection. Shout out to her, and go donate to Operation Prom.
Yeah, she's definitely got a huge mind for business. Taught me some great stuff about marketing and event planning and whatnot in the College of Westchester. But yes, huge shout out to her. And let's talk about some sports before we get to the personal questions. Because trust me, I have a lineup here. But
I'm nice.
Yeah, so obviously this past weekend we had the big NFL wildcard games, round one, I like to call it, in football. What were your takeaways from this past weekend's NFL playoff wildcard games, especially, the Giants coming off that terrible loss to the Green Bay Packers on Sunday evening?
My takeaway is it was a snooze fest. I mean, there was not one good game in the lot, and it was mostly expected, I think, with three of those games for that to be the case. The Houston-Oakland game was obviously the Oakland Raiders couldn't do anything without Derek Carr, so you expected Houston to walk away with a victory, and they did. Detroit was a joke of a team coming into the playoffs, so Seattle could have taken care of business very easily at home, and they did. And then Miami, Matt Moore at quarterback, they're not going to do much against Pittsburgh, even a Pittsburgh team they beat earlier in the year, but they're not the same Steelers that they were when Miami beat them. And then we get to the Giants game, which is so unfortunate because I really thought that was going to be the game of the week and they would keep it close. But I also did think that if Eli Manning was in trouble, and he was later in the second half, where Aaron Rodgers put up like 24 points or more on the board, there was no way the Giants could come back because they don't have a run game and they only have limited options on offense, and a lot of defenses can kind of key in and say, oh, they're going to pass. What a shock. And so that's kind of what happened, I think.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. This was a snooze fest of a playoff especially a playoff week. Usually these games every single year are more competitive, more exciting, more emotional. I just didn't feel that energy this week or this past weekend, except of course with the Giants game. But that's because I root for the Giants and I'm a Giants fan. Though I don't know, man. I don't know if I didn't root for the Giants, I think that game might have been a snooze fest as well, especially in the second half. But yeah, it's very disappointing the way everything went down. Eli Manning had a great performance. The only guy really that showed up for the Giants offensively, because he was prepared. He was making clutch throws. He was accurate. Everything that you could ask about Eli Manning in the playoffs, he came through as he always does. But his wide receivers let him down. You mentioned it. They had no running game. It was just an abysmal performance by them offensively, and we knew going in that was going to be the question, because we knew the defense was going to step up. But as far as their offense, if they can't put points on the board, how do you expect to survive against Aaron Rodgers playing at home? That's not possible,
Right. Well, I think that's kind of the funny thing about this game is, everyone's saying, oh, the Giants, this looks like 2007 again. This looks like 2011. They got a team with Eli Manning and they've got a really good defense. Like that means that they're going to, head right to the Super Bowl again. And I kept saying, no, this isn't the same team, because those teams had a running game. And so Eli could play action a little bit, and he could lean on the running game a little bit more. But, when you have to abandon the run, that's it. It's game over, because these defenses, especially one that pass rushes as well as the Packers can, and their secondary is not that great. But the ultimate thing is you're stuck, and you're we've seen it in the last I think it was like 6 or 7 games in the regular season that Eli Manning passed for over 200 something yards. Like once, I think it was. So that tells a story to me that the Giants kind of had. When you lean on Eli to throw that much, it's just not going to. They can't do it against a playoff team, especially one with an Aaron Rodgers, continuing to impress on offense.
Yeah, and you mentioned how much he had to throw. I mean, look at this. Perkins only ran for 30 yards on 10 carries, and Rashad Jennings ran for 29 yards on 5 carries. I mean, that little bit of production, to get that little bit of production out of your running game is pathetic. Eli Manning had to throw for 44 passes, and he only completed 23 out of those 44. And you mentioned that, this was probably another one of those rare games where he threw for over or just at about 299 yards. Could have had more if it weren't for some drop passes, and he only had 1 touchdown, which came from Tavares King, and it wasn't the wide receiver anybody expected. But to get that little bit of production, man, I mean, just 10 carries from Perkins and 5 from Rashad Jennings, that sums it up right there.
Yeah, it's not good, and I think going in the offseason, you got to start thinking about what are they going to do in the draft. And I think they have I think it's 23rd pick. They're probably going to concentrate on the offensive line again, and this has been the theme for the last 4 years or so. They really have to take a look and see, because that's really where it happens, right? The Dallas Cowboys have made their money this year running the ball and protecting Dak Prescott, because their offensive line is just that good, and the Giants have holes still on that line, and they still need to figure it out, especially when you have Eric Flowers playing left tackle and being ineffective. So you move him to the right. Can they get a franchise left tackle at 23 or wherever they're picking? I don't know. Don't see that happening, but it's something they're definitely going to think about, or maybe they sign somebody.
Yeah, he definitely hasn't been effective, Flowers, so that's been another disappointment for the Giants. And people, they love to knock Eli, but blame Eli all you want. I don't think any blame can be put on him for the Sunday performance at all. I think he's the only guy, I said it earlier, that showed up to play. Aaron Rodgers is Aaron Rodgers. If you give him a chance to come back, he's going to kill you. That's how he is. And also another thing about their defense, I know they've been tremendous and everything, but have you noticed how when they had to go up against a high-octane offensive team, it hasn't exactly been, a dominant effort? Because you look at the game when they played the Steelers at Heinz Field, that was another disappointment on our defense as well. So do you think in the long run that our defense was everything people were hyping it up to be, or do you think it was just kind of a in-between kind of defense where, yeah, we can stop, these okay in-between teams, but when it comes to an elite playoff team, we just simply didn't have it?
It's a good question. I think the answer to that is that sometimes, right? Like, I think that the pass rush has always been this year not one that sacks too much. It doesn't result in a lot of sacks. There were a lot of coverage sacks on Sunday, which was a good sign for the secondary that they were doing their job. Then, of course, that all broke down in the second half. But I think that this is a team that hurries the quarterback a lot and really gets, collapses pockets and does that sort of thing, but doesn't necessarily get to the quarterback as effectively as other teams. And what I think happened here, and I saw it in the second half more, was Aaron Rodgers moved around the pocket better. And there was one play where he had like 9 seconds to throw, where he's deking out, a guy's stepping forward, stepping back. And this is just what Aaron Rodgers does. So I think, against a team like that, or against a quarterback like that, I should say, who can move around the pocket and kind of, elude tacklers, would-be tacklers, that's just what happens is eventually they end up beating that Giants pass rush.
Right. And I do think the Hail Mary pass also took a lot out of them. Like, they probably lost some energy, motivation, and all of that, So, things like that tend to happen in a big game situation. But again, the defense can only do so much. Like, they did so great in the first half to help out, and it was up to the offense to answer that call, and I don't think they did, and that's why the defense ultimately broke down. But anyway, we move on now from the Giants to Odell Beckham Jr., who has been the headline all week here in New York. There's been controversy surrounding him before, during, and even after the game, with punching the wall with his head after a press conference. What are your thoughts on this entire Odell situation?
Well, I wrote something earlier in the year about it when there was sort of all this talk about him blowing up during games. You'd just see it. You'd see eventually what would happen is and it started kind of with Josh Norman, the Josh Norman incident last year. I shouldn't say last year because that was 2016 now. That's crazy. In 2015, you saw it where a guy gets under his skin and all of a sudden he blows up. And it's on the field. Like, I'm okay with my player, if I'm a head coach or a GM, or, having the fire on the field and then off the field kind of being, kind of letting out that steam elsewhere. And I'm not saying going out and partying. That's not what I'm saying. But like somebody who can sort of stay focused on the field, but when he's off the field, maybe he's a little bit of a hothead. I can deal with that. But a player that is a hothead on the field and can be thrown off his game, that's a problem. So I kind of said that was the problem. And so what he's had to learn, and I said this way, it must have been October or November, is, you got to learn how to take that fire and channel it, otherwise your talent gets lost in the shuffle. So I think that them talking about kind of Odell Beckham growing up, that's kind of what they're referring to. It's not just letting him, telling him like not to do things. It's to take that competitive fuel that makes him punch a wall or makes him, lose his stuff again on the field and just channel it in a way that he can, stay focused and stay talented on the field. Because if you get thrown off your game, well, opponents are going to get under your skin every game, and it can be a problem.
Yeah, and I don't think that what his performance has anything to do with the boat incident that happened last Monday. I think that was blown out of proportion. If anything, I just think that maybe the pressure of him being in a playoff game for the first time, his youth and inexperience, I think that's what kind of got to his head. And also the distraction. He said it himself, the distraction that was displayed after the boat incident, that probably mentally, damaged him or something. But I don't think it has anything to do with him going on a trip in Miami on his day off,
No, certainly not. And it was blown out of proportion, as most things are in the New York City media or New York media. The distraction might have been the fact that he felt like he had something to prove first playoff game. But we've seen it all year. It's what happens is teams seem to, they're going to double your best guy. And the Giants don't have many other options. Sterling Shepard has been very good this year, but they don't have like a guy in the middle of the field, a tight end like they've had in past Super Bowl teams that can grab some of that attention away, just enough of it to give Beckham a little bit of room. And then, you get a frustrated Odell Beckham who's not getting the ball, or, if he makes one mistake, it's in his head. You saw that pass drop in the end zone in the first quarter. And you thought, like here comes Odell. He's nervous. And a friend of mine pointed out to me that he had been on the sidelines getting like a third pair of gloves. Like, is that in his head? Or, so you kind of wonder, can he recover from this? He's young. He's only 24 years old. So let's see what he can do to take this and learn from it.
Yeah, I'm going to wait on judging him just yet because, as you just said, he's young. This was his first playoff game. And what, is he only in his third year now or going into his fourth years? Yeah, so, like, people, that's the thing about New York. When you're a superstar, people are always going to have the camera on you no matter how young you are. It doesn't matter, they're always going to be ready to print something out about you. But I think after next season, I can ultimately describe and put a definition of what Odell Beckham Jr. is, or at least is going to be. I don't think I can do that after one playoff game. We have to see him thrive now and see how he recovers from all the pressure and everything that's gone on after the playoff game. I think that's when you can ultimately start judging him. But it's like you said, he's young, so will he recover from this? That's a question that remains to be seen. But for now, I'm not going to be one of those people that jumps on Odell Beckham Jr. for what happened, and it sounds to me like you aren't going to be one of those people either.
Well, he's already a superstar. That's the thing is he's one of the most talented receivers in the NFL and has a chance to be one of the all-time greats. You can see it. The speed that he puts on those afterburners, on those little slants and those little that move across the middle, where all of a sudden he's taking off and a safety goes, I can't catch up with him. And he, the leaping catches, the one-handed catches, it's all there for the taking. And what kills me sometimes in sports in general is seeing a guy with all the talent in the universe and it's squandered on stupidity. And I'm not saying that he's done that yet, but he's got to learn. And he doesn't. I don't want him to end up there, and I don't think he will yet. But it's possible. That's kind of my take.
Yeah, it is possible, and I think that with that passion and emotion that drives and fuels inside of him, I think it can lead to good things, as you said. If he uses it the right way on the field and makes it all about winning and not all about himself, just imagine Odell Beckham Jr. 5 years from now. I mean, this guy's going to be terrific, and he hasn't been injured yet, which I'm not hoping injury on him, of course, but it goes to show you he's a pretty healthy, consistent player. And it doesn't seem like he's easy to hurt or anything like that. So, again, these are underrated aspects about him that also make him great. The fact that he's there every single week, hasn't been hurt, so keep that in mind. And from there on out, we can only expect Odell Beckham Jr. to grow. But the funny thing about the picture from the Miami trip, all the wide receivers in that picture, and all of them seem to have a problem or a meltdown at one point in the season when passes weren't getting thrown to them. So I find it funny that there was some sort of conflict between them throughout the regular season, and then you see that union of all of them just being together on a trip to Miami. Do you think that kind of describes the entire season for them?
I'm not so sure it does. It's an interesting observation. I think this season to me it can be. It's more to me about what the defense did this year and really what the front office did to upgrade the defense. And I was kind of joking over the summer, like Tom Coughlin. Everyone made this joke, that Tom Coughlin must be losing sleep because hey, where was that money for my defense in the last few years that got him ultimately out of the organization? That to me is the story of the season. All this. The sort of the Miami boat talk is just one of those tabloid things that makes people say, oh, it's a distraction. But really, this is a team that won 10 games and they survived in a really tough NFC East environment. And I think that in the future, it's now about building on that again, because that's what the Giants' hallmark has always been. It's the defense first. It's what won them a couple of rings, and then it's sort of, all right, Eli Manning's still there. Now, the other thing is you got to start thinking about a quarterback now, and I've seen talk about that from the brass. I'm not saying replace Eli yet, but you got to start thinking about the future now because they don't have another option. I think Ryan Nassib, I think that is a failed experiment. So maybe you start drafting a quarterback in the second or third round next year and start grooming somebody for taking over for Eli.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate, really, because I grew up with Eli Manning. I don't want to start thinking about the potential of him leaving just yet. I think he's going to be one of those overlooked quarterbacks now that I think about it when it's all said and done for him, because people really don't realize the kind of level of talent he really is.
Oh, 100%. I actually did something about how he was one of the most I think I said the most underrated quarterback in postseason history. I mean, the guy's And then there are all the anti people coming out saying, well, he's lost 3 or 4 playoff games and been one and done in a few of those years, and only won those 8 games that he's won in the Super Bowl seasons. But still, then I'm like, okay, well, you're talking about a quarterback who made the throw to Mario Manningham that is such a hard throw to into almost double coverage, right on the sideline, on the marks. That kind of talent, it's overlooked. You're absolutely right. I don't think he's the greatest. I don't know if he's in the conversation for top 10 greatest quarterback of all time. I certainly don't think that, but he's done it. He's solid. I don't think you can criticize him, at least in this quarterback generation, for being under Ben Roethlisberger. I think he's on the same level as a guy like that.
I agree. And another thing is he's brave, he's gutsy in clutch situations. He's not afraid to throw it down the field. And, people give him a lot of flack, for throwing a lot of picks and stuff. But again, those picks come with him wanting to win football games and taking risks that other quarterbacks don't necessarily do, So that's another thing I can appreciate about him. But give us some predictions for this weekend's divisional round matchups to close out NFL talk.
Sure. Well, I think I'm going to take the Packers. I'm pretty sure that what I saw out of Aaron Rodgers last week is what I'll see on the road in Dallas. I just think that if Rodgers and the Packers go up like 21-0 or 21-7, and Dak Prescott is given the ball to make a comeback, that's not his role. He's not necessarily going to be winging the ball over the field to get back to keep up with the Packers offense. So that I kind of see an upset on the road. I guess you'd call it an upset because Dallas will be at home. I really like the Atlanta Falcons at home. I think that Seattle, what we saw last week was a bit of a mirage because they were at home and they were facing the Lions, who were not that great of a team. And Russell Wilson struggled all season. The defense isn't the same without Earl Thomas. So I think Atlanta emerges and goes to an NFC Championship game. And in the AFC, obviously, Bill Belichick at home against Houston with Brock Osweiler. I don't have to say anymore. The Patriots are going to walk away easily with a victory. And I think the game of the week, a lot of people are talking about Green Bay and Dallas, but I think the game of the week is going to be Pittsburgh and Kansas City. Kansas City's so much fun to watch on both sides of the ball, and I think Pittsburgh, we saw it last week, if Ben Roethlisberger and Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell are all on the same page, it's great, and the defense can bend, not break on certain things, and boom, you got yourself an amazing game. I said boom like John Madden, but that's how I'm feeling about this game. I'm feeling like John Madden about this game.
Yeah, the Chiefs, I think, are one of the most, the biggest team that everybody is sleeping on right now. Like they're that sleeper team that's waiting to wake everyone up and say, hey, we're in this thing too. I think that's what they're going to do. They're going to show up on Sunday. I'm not going to say they're going to blow out the Steelers necessarily, but as you said, it's going to be a very good game from start to finish. It'll probably come down, to the final 2 minutes, but I think it's going to be a low-scoring defensive game for sure. But again, you can never underestimate Ben Roethlisberger either, because he's been there, done that. With Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell, they can always kill you as well. So, yeah, if anything, I think that might be you've sold me. You've sold me. I think that might be the best game actually. Now that I'm thinking about it, because it's like two sleeper teams here. That can just attack at any given moment. And also Andy Reid, in these kind of situations, he's a great head coach. He always makes the right calls when it comes down to winning a football game. So you're right. I think that might be the game that's going to be the game everybody's sleeping on and ultimately turns out to surprise everybody. Also, I think in the AFC, the Chiefs are the only defensive team that has a chance of stopping the Patriots. So, yeah, I think that's another possibility that we could see there.
It's funny you say that, because I think the Steelers have the offense to keep up with the Patriots, funny enough. But, yeah, I could see the Chiefs kind of working in and figuring out a way to kind of stop what the Patriots do. But is anybody stopping the Patriots? I don't think so. I think it's
Especially
another Patriots.
Not at home.
No, definitely, most certainly not. You don't ever bet against Belichick at home.
Right. But as far as the Packers and Cowboys game, you said it earlier, man. I just don't trust Dak Prescott in a game-winning situation. When the game is on the line, he hasn't done it all season long. I mean, yeah, he probably did it once in overtime or earlier against the Eagles and whatnot. But he's been a conservative quarterback for the most part, and he hasn't really gone for the long ball. We saw in that one game against the Giants where he did go for the long ball, and he made a mistake there, and it cost him. So I just don't trust him in that kind of situation at all. And I think Aaron Rodgers, who's been there and done that and is known to be an offensive cannon, I think he has more room for doing, the long ball thing that he always does, as opposed to Dak Prescott, which is why I agree. I give the Packers an advantage there simply because of the fact that they're going to come out ready to attack and are not afraid to explode on offense.
Yeah, I mean, you have to give credit, obviously. I think the MVP award should go to the Dallas Cowboys offensive line this year, but, obviously that's not happening. But it'll keep them in it. But their defense, the Cowboys defense is kind of suspect. So we'll see if the Packers can take advantage. I think they will. And in the playoffs, it's always who's the quarterback. It's not like TJ Yates is winning games. I mean, he did once. But, we're talking about Dak Prescott. He's a rookie. Sometimes you get the jitters in the playoffs. So we'll see.
It's going to be fun, that's for sure. And as far as an early MVP pick, for me, it's Aaron Rodgers. Real quick, do you have an MVP pick yet?
Yeah, in terms of the season, that's a good question. I think probably a lot of people are voting for Ezekiel Elliott, but Rodgers is not a bad pick. That's not a bad one. I think you go with Tom Brady, obviously, because Tom Brady is Tom Brady. And, he's missing 4 games. The Pats went and won, a few games, but then he comes back and they basically run the table. So, you got to say that he is truly the most valuable player in the league, although Bill Belichick kind of deserves that, doesn't he?
Yeah, both of them, as always. What's new,
Right.
And he does have the best touchdown to interception ratio, does Tom Brady, which is special.
Yeah,
but again,
2 interceptions. It's insane.
Yeah, it is. All right, now on to the personal stuff here. So, you have a huge writing background, and in your past, you've written and contributed features for The Daily, ESPN, the magazine, and even the New York Post. When did you first discover you wanted to be a writer and that you had the potential to do this?
I wanted to be a screenwriter growing up in high school. I discovered my love of movies, old movies, films, and my mother's who's totally into movies. She said, listen, if you're going to be a screenwriter, you got to know your film history. So we sat down and watched movies all the time, and I kind of dug that. And at a certain point, I was like the editor of my high school newspaper. But I took a few years off in college. I was like, I'm tired of doing like the journalism thing, man. And then my junior year, a friend of mine said to me, listen, the columnist for the Haverford, that's where I went, school newspaper, they're looking, they're looking for a national sports columnist. Do you want to do it? And I said, yeah, sure, I'll give it a shot. And the first column I ever wrote, I went, oh man, I want to do this. This is what I want to do in my life. In the process, I also discovered I'd rather be a playwright. And so after college, I said to myself, I really would love to make some money, because playwrights, I don't know if I can be a starving artist. So I said, all right, I'll get in this journalism thing. And that's sort of where I discovered my love of both writing and reporting.
So it's interesting how you made that transition there. Actually, I have another question to follow up with that then, because when did you discover the passion for covering sports then? Was that something that growing up you also loved to do, like watching sports and eventually the drama and the buzz surrounding all of that? Like, when did that start out for you as well?
Sure. I grew up in New York City, and I grew up watching and devouring sports all the time. I watched so much. My parents, I think, tried to limit it a little bit, but you can't contain that passion. I was a huge Mets fan. I went to my first game when I was 3, and went. I had 6 or 7 times a year. Became a Rangers fan in the '90s, as most kids did when they won the Cup. Discovering hockey comes a little bit later because it's sort of a niche sport to some people. Knicks fan, through and through. Went to a Knicks Bulls playoff game. That was kind of my one of the highlights of my childhood, and obviously the Giants. But followed the Giants. I can remember exactly where I was when Wide Right happened, and I was always passionate about sports. I don't think I ever realized that I could do it as a living until much later. I'd read the newspaper every day, and I'd kind of read Sports Illustrated and the sort of early internet stuff, which I know you're very young to be thinking about. But yeah. Once upon a time, I was reading a real newspaper. Not to sound like an old dude, but and so I discovered obviously at a young age, like, oh yeah, sports is where it's at, and arguing about it with your friends and playing fantasy, which involved a lot of pen and paper calculations before there was internet stuff. Yeah, so it was a whole thing to discover, and a whole world that opened up to me.
Very interesting. So was it easy for you then to like you said from the first column you wrote, was that easy for you? Like, oh, hey, here I am. I love sports. I love writing. So boom, like, was it that easy, or was it something that you still were thinking about as you were doing it?
That's a good question. I think that I was thinking about how, you write. Writing came easily to me. Both my parents are writers, so it was in my blood. They never said to me like, "Oh, you got to be a writer," but I found a passion for it early on. And so writing about something that you're passionate about is the easiest thing in the world to do. But when you're trying to craft a column that way, that's a little trickier. That's a little tougher. So you have to kind of learn how to craft your words the right way and make your argument a certain way, or try to, kind of open it and close it. I didn't really have anybody over my shoulder kind of helping me out yet to find that voice. But then there were also times I said, hey, I could use some experience reporting, so I'd go and interview, various teams and do some stories that were, sort of straight journalism, and that was a challenge because I know I liked to talk to people, but I didn't know if I could get what I was looking for, asking the right questions, kind of putting people in a place where they could answer my questions. So there are all those challenges that come along with it you don't think about when you're saying, oh, I want to be a sports writer. You say, well, what comes along with that is asking the right questions, asking them a certain way, how to speak to an athlete, a coach, etc.
Right. Now, how was the process of starting from the ground to building up your reputation? And, was there any connections, relationship involved? Was it something easy, or were you ever nervous, as you said, like asking questions and finding the right people to talk to and all of that? Like, basically describe your entire journey.
Oh, I'll try that. That could take the rest of this show, but I'll try to keep it kind of. I'll try to keep it simple. Yeah, I mean, to answer your first question about kind of relationships, the answer is journalism is all about connections. So, I knew somebody at the New York Post. I spoke to him. He gave me some advice. I did some work there. Got a clip or two there. I worked with an editor on a baseball site that was early internet. That was kind of fun that I wrote it for a while. And then, you meet various people. I did an internship at Entertainment Weekly, which is really funny. That was sort of pre-sports. And I met somebody then at People Magazine. And you sort of walk your way through the ladder to eventually somebody calling me from ESPN, the magazine, saying, hey, come interview, and eventually got a job there. So, yeah, all of those connections kind of help you get from point A to point B to point C to point D and so on and so forth. And eventually you have this whole network of people that you know from various places you've worked who, and you're helping them and they're helping you. And it's pretty cool. As for learning the ropes of journalism, it's sort of, they throw you in the water and say, all right, go to the locker room and ask some questions. And you're sort of, I just remember the first time I was in a professional sports locker room and just quaking, like, oh my God, what do I do? And you just learn by doing. I made a few mistakes for sure. I've called players by pronouncing their name wrong. That's not something you kind of want to do. I spoke to a pitcher who was starting on the day that I was speaking to him, which is apparently a huge no-no, but nobody told me that. And I look back and I sort of wince at those thoughts, but I also sit there and go, I learned a thing or two that day and really learned how to do my thing. And you just learn by doing. You ask questions, and if that one doesn't land, you say, all right, maybe I should have asked it this way. So yeah, it's a whole process.
Yeah, and I'm looking to have similar goals, and one of the key things I think about everybody should always be confident. So I guess you were always confident in your work. There was never a moment where you ever broke down as far as nervousness go. Like you mentioned earlier how you still made mistakes, but still managed to, I guess, also control the balance of you breaking down and just learning from it and blocking it out and just saying, oh, next time I won't do that. So how easy was that for you to just move on and eventually start, having everything come full circle for you and eventually click?
Oh, extremely hard, I would say. It's not my personality to kind of take criticism, but I learned early on, and this is back in college, where if somebody was critical, I'd say, oh man, like that's terrible. I don't need that. Don't want that. It stinks to be criticized. Then you realize you got to build a thicker skin up and just say, comes to the territory. Not everyone's going to agree with you. Not everyone's going to think what you do is good. Everyone's a critic. And so I think I sat there and you learn it that, every day unfortunately it's a cliche, but you think about what baseball players say, every day you go out and, every day, one game at a time. It's true, unfortunately, as cliched as it is to sit there and say, yeah, all right, today didn't go so well, but I can always go out tomorrow, take my swings, and maybe I'll connect on one. So I think learning that and sort of processing that feeling of like, all right, you know what, like that didn't write that piece well, made a mistake here, made a factual error here, didn't write the best lead, or that wasn't really funny. What I came up with is kind of dumb. So on and so forth. You just sit there and go, all right, well, and especially in today's internet age where it's like you get another chance the next day or the next post. It's pretty great.
Right. And you said earlier you were a Mets fan. There's a story because I read on your bio on For the Win that says you're famous for dropping an easy foul ball at the old Shea Stadium and you got booed. What's the story behind that?
I got to give you credit. You did your homework. That's a good sign. Very good. So this is what you were saying when you were like, I got some good questions for you. That is one. It was, I forgot what year it was. It was, I think, early 2000s. I think I was either going to college or had gone to college, maybe like freshman year. I'm in the old Shea Stadium sitting down the left field line with my father because we always sat down that line usually together. And I'd always wanted to catch a foul ball. My father had actually picked one up years ago that I still have on my shelf.
Nice.
Just like ripped it off the ground, which is not really like catching a ball. So I was like, oh man, it'd be really cool. And I forgot who the player was, but it was a lefty who hit it. And it was one of these sort of arcs. It started arcing toward, how a foul ball kind of trajectory goes, toward the field, and then it comes back in the stands. And I'll tell you, I stepped out. I took one step to my right. I took one step into the aisle. And the ball was right there for me. I didn't have to move muscle. There was nobody in my way. And as it was coming in, I've played sports recreationally. I was never a varsity player. I did play tennis, but no baseball. No, I played it recreationally, so I could catch a ball and throw a ball. But nothing like seeing a screaming liner coming at you. And so I sort of remember putting my hand up because it was a little bit taller. The ball was coming in a little bit higher, and I turned my head last second and obviously took my eyes off the ball, and it ricocheted off the top of my glove. And then I turned around a second later, and the entire stadium full of it was 30,000 people, 25,000 people booing me. And it was so humiliating. And people came by, God bless New Yorkers, they're the best, and came by and teased me about it relentlessly. And I took my licks as I should, and I was very amused, and hopefully, maybe I'll be with my son someday and actually catch ball and have that redemption. But if I don't, that's okay. It was kind of an amusing moment in my sports life.
Just curious, did this ever make TV, like the broadcast on SNY?
No, it wasn't that. No, it wasn't. If it had hit me in the face, I bet you it would have made a broadcast somewhere. But no, it was probably cameras weren't on me. It wasn't that easy. There aren't a lot of foul balls that make it to TV unless something really, really cool happens. But no, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately for me.
Well, hey, I think that's still a pretty cool story because now you have a lot of New Yorkers who probably approach you from that, and hey, there you go.
Yeah, right. They're making fun of me. It was a great New York moment. They went, "Hey, we're sending you back down to the minors," or like, "Oh," they grabbed my glove and they said, "Oh, there's no hole in here. What happened?" It's thanks, man.
Yep. All right. So let's talk about NJ.com now. Earlier on, you were also a New York Rangers reporter and a Sports Buzz reporter for that website, NJ.com. Describe the experience working there and how did the opportunity present itself?
Well, I was at the Daily for a year. That was a sort of a thing that an iPad-only publication that was run by Rupert Murdoch of Fox fame that didn't just quite work out for anybody. It folded, I think, a year and a half after. And I was looking for gainful employment, and I saw a job listing for a Rangers writer at NJ.com, and I leaped at it. I was like, I've been a Rangers fan for a long time. I did mention that in my cover letter. I wasn't sure it would fly, but why not? It's good to tell everybody that the history of the team. And I was their beat reporter for a year. What was funny about that was that during that year there was a lockout. So I basically, quote unquote, covered the lockout for 6 months before I actually went to games. And it was a really fun experience. And like you talk about learning experiences, it was such a huge learning experience because the coach at the time was John Tortorella, who was famous for being a little testy with the media, I guess would be a good way of putting it. So I kind of learned how to get an answer out of him. It took a long time, actually. I thought, great. Like, I really learned my stuff with him. I kind of learned, how to really get an answer out of him or to get some respect. I don't know if I got respect. I don't think he could pick me out of a lineup and remember that I was covering him at that time. But what was funny is it wasn't funny, but he got fired later on. So I was all prepared to, next season be like, all right, I'll get better stuff out of Torts. And, they ended up hiring somebody else. And I ended up getting taken off the beat anyway because they said, oh, look, we really could use somebody who could do a lot of what they called buzz reporting, which is, basically sort of like, here's the cool thing that's happening on the internet with our local teams. So I did that for a while, which is kind of where I ended up, kind of learning the just what makes good internet writing. And
how easier was it back then? Because I always like to make that comparison from back then to now. Obviously, social media and, the internet has changed drastically. But do you think it was ever easier or harder in terms of what you do now as opposed to what you did maybe even a few years ago? Because every year, this world just seems to evolve more and more. So in terms of covering special events and writing and what have you, how has the socialization behind that changed from now until then, in your opinion?
Well, it's funny. Like, now and then is not that far away from each other, so it's funny that you asked that. I think I'll put it this way: I learned a lot about what the internet wants to read and how they want to consume it and all that. And I think that even before that, at the daily kind of learning, like, okay, like, what are people responding to on social media? And that was sort of early days of not actually that early, because I remember being at ESPN the magazine and people talking about Twitter and being like, oh, I should join that. So I think that there's a lot of there's been some changes, but you kind of at NJ.com, at least I was sort of learning the ropes at a site where we're trying to get our way into the national media scene, which you've got your Sports Illustrateds who are maybe talking about the same story. So you're thinking, okay, how do I get NJ.com to kind of have its time read on the internet?
So not much difference there then, basically.
Yeah, I wouldn't say so. I mean, I think that the big difference for me was going from magazine to the internet and sort of seeing the change in schedule, because ESPN the magazine was published every 2 weeks, so you kind of had like downtime and uptime and kind of learning what stories will play in a magazine environment as opposed to on the internet where it evaporates just like that. You read it, you move on. You write it, you move on.
Right. And now you're currently a writer for the Win, USA Today Sports, and are about to actually celebrate 1 year of working there in February. See, so I did even more research.
Reading my resume, are you? No, that's great.
How did that opportunity arrive, and was it something that you intended to do? Like, was that your purpose, moving from NJ.com to USA Today Sports, or was that just something that came to you?
It came to me, I how should I put this? I've always read For the Win since it started. I had friends who worked there, and I found an opportunity and took it, and I'd always admired kind of what they did, and to see what I was doing at NJ.com done on a national scale, it's really kind of cool, and you kind of see like, okay, like, how are they doing things? And so it was really cool to join the staff, and it's been a blast, and I love working there. And 1 year anniversary coming up, pretty crazy.
Yeah. Do you remember the exact day?
The exact date? Oh, it was like March, I think it was. It was right after the Super Bowl. I know that. It was like late February, early March. I remember going down to DC for my first week there.
Oh, that's pretty cool, man. And tell us about like a day at work there. Like how is the process of publishing and writing and editing? How has that all come about for you, basically?
You wake up and you go, all right, what's going on? Like, what are people talking about? And you try to figure. Sometimes you're just finding stuff that's like kind of cool. I can't think of a good example off the top of my head. I just posted something about right before I took this interview with you I did just something on a really cool badminton video that was like the coolest rally you'll ever see. That's kind of a fun highlight. But then there's also, you had the national championship game yesterday, so it's like, all right, how do we get people talking about it, or what are the highlights that we should be concentrating on, or kind of moments, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of the mentality you have going into every day is, all right, let's figure out what people are talking about and talk about it.
Oh, that's pretty cool. So as far as like your own reveals and pieces and whatnot, is that more of individual effort coming from you? Does the whole team sit down and kind of meet up and say, hey, what are people talking about today? Let's come up with these ideas, or is it more of you basically just thinking from your own feet and saying, hey, this is what's going to go out today. Let's go for it.
Sometimes depends on the day, depends on things, but it is a very collaborative environment where we're kind of tossing ideas back and forth, or saying, oh, look at this, like this is amazing, well, I'll do it, or I wrote something recently about Eli Manning, as I mentioned earlier, about Eli Manning being the most underrated playoff quarterback. That was just me sitting there going, we're coming up on the NFL playoffs, like I do believe this, and I'm going to back it up with some stats. And I found some stats, and I said, hey, I'm going to do this. And everyone's like, great, do it. So that's kind of a cool environment to be in.
Man, that's a pretty awesome job where you can just walk in, basically think on your feet, be creative, and just put content out there. I think that's a pretty good job to have. It's unique, it's characteristic, because I think it describes a person's personality and all of that. So I don't know, man. I just think that writing, like broadcasting for me, is primary. But if writing were ever to be an alternative, I'd knock on the door for it as well, because I just like that, where you can just have the freedom, or maybe not the freedom, but I guess just the relaxation of being able to be comfortable going into an environment where hey, you can write on your own, think of your own ideas and whatnot. It's got to be cool, man, right? Like, that's pretty cool.
It is, yeah. And I don't know if every environment is like that, but it is certainly a really cool spot to be in, where you're saying, hey, like, I can be creative. And one of the things that I've tried to embrace over years is my weird brain, because sometimes I come up with random ideas. Today I just wrote something where I found every photo I could find of Bill Belichick making the same grumpy, smirky face, and just posting it because I thought people would click on it and laugh. So, that or just kind of, it's an observation too about Bill Belichick that, like, he's got the best poker face in the business, and that's part of the reason why there's this allure, or this sort of the mystique surrounding Bill Belichick is that he can make the same face over and over and over again, because you don't really know what he's thinking, and that's Bill Belichick. So that's the kind of thing where you say, man, that's a cool gig.
Yeah, and I actually saw that tweet. It's actually gotten pretty popular over the last few minutes and hours. I saw the retweets. Oh man, like so it's working. I guess Bill Belichick. Hey, everybody loves him for that.
Right, or hates him, and that's the fun thing is you find that thing that people are passionate about, whether hate it or like it, and and people can argue about it. That's kind of what we've come to today in sports in general and in journalism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something that I like as well, where it's not always, it's about the games, or, it's about the numbers and everything that goes on in a game, because I think the drama, the buzz, the energy surrounding all of it is also just as important. You got to have people to tune in, in order to become a sports fan. That's how I became a sports fan. You don't only talk about the games, like you talk about the history or the rivalry, or something that adds a little bit of spark involved in it. And I think that's what people tend to overlook, especially if you're not a sport fan. You just kind of look at it, oh, hey, it's a game. It's really not, man. Like, if you want your entertainment value, if you want the theatric aspect of it, you get all of that in sports too. And I hate to kind of say that, because it comes off as me just saying, oh, it's entertainment, or it's no different than anything else. But no, sports is really a combination of everything. It's just that people look at it and I guess they think it's always just about the athlete or the game or the athletic side of it, but it's really not. And I think it's just a pretty cool thing where you can say something extra about sports. You know what I'm trying to say?
I do. I think what you're saying is, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there's drama, comedy. There's a story to every play,
Right.
every moment, everything. I think that there's beauty in that, and I think of it also as art, which is it couples two things that I've grown up loving since I was a kid, which is I do love like theater and movies and going to the Metropolitan Museum of Art and looking at art, and you see these funny connecting similarities between those two things. You think of Derek Jeter making that backhanded play and turn around. That's ballet, and so I think there is that draw. So when people maybe say like, oh, it's just sports. No, it's not just sports. The people who love sports. That's true.
Exactly, and that's how I became a fan personally, because I remember I was watching a Yankee Red Sox game. Actually, it was the ALCS. Was it Game 3, 2003? Yeah, and I was watching it, and at that time, I think it was Pedro Martinez on the mound, and you know what he's famous for doing in that game, where he threw the ball over Kareem Garcia's head, and that moment basically sold a deal for me on, hey, I'm a Yankee fan, I hate the Red Sox, boom, and from there it just, I became a sports guy. So that's always how it is. It's not ever about like, oh, a team wins a game, or a lot of times it's not even a play. It could just simply be a moment, So I think that's pretty special.
Yeah, could totally agree. I mean, this is my livelihood, but it is a passion for sure.
Mm-hmm. And as far as publishing everything, like putting out the content, is there a cycle in terms of deadlines where you have to release stuff on certain dates, or is it more of you just walking in and feeling free to publish something even on that same day that you work on it?
Oh, it again, that all depends on the piece and the thing and the subject. Sometimes I'm writing up an interview of an example. And all right, I'll publish this tomorrow. It can go, whatever, or a bigger, long-term, kind of long-form piece that that might take weeks. And then sometimes it's within the hour. You see something, you go, oh, I'm going to put it up, and you do. And so it's a mix of those things.
Right. All right. Now let's talk a little bit about your book, which is entitled "Strange Country Day." This book was released in 2015. What's the story behind wanting to write this book? And does it relate to you in any personal way, as far as like a message that you like to send out in terms of life?
Sure. Yeah. All of that. I've had a lot of people saying like, man, you should write a book. You should write a book. And I was trying to come up with an idea, not necessarily forcing myself, but one day, I was in a car ride with my parents, and my mother turned around and said, I had a book idea for you, which you hear from your, if you've got, family, they'll always say like, I got an idea for you. And you always have a grain of salt. And my mother turned around and said, I got this idea. Vampires playing football. And this was mid 2000s. So I'm sitting there going, it feels like vampires are so done. You've got Twilight, and you've got the Vampire Diaries, and all these, pop culture things that are referring to vampires. But there's something there. And my book now, if anyone's listening, my book is not about vampires and playing football. It's not. But it inspired this idea because I thought about, all right, well, like, what would it look like if a vampire caught a football? He'd like leap like 10 feet in the air and catch it and fly, And who's throwing the football? So I said, all right, wait a second. I'm going to take another inspiration of mine, which is comic books. And I said, all right, well, what if they have special powers? And so that's kind of where the book goes. So it's sort of like the combination between comic books and sports, two of my big passions. And the message in it is, I guess, is I want people to book, obviously, so I can't quite give it all away. But it's sort of the story of these junior high school kids who realize that they are special, even when they might not feel special in that junior high school environment, because basically we're all outsiders, especially when we're in junior high school. We feel like an outsider no matter what. Even the cool kids I know felt like outsiders in their own skin. So you just, you find that thing that makes you feel special, and you kind of sort of pursue it. So that was the message. And the basic story is, it's the first person telling of a kid's first day in seventh grade, and all of a sudden he discovers something weird is going on with him, and he finds out his friends have something weird going on with them, and they kind of deal with bullies and first dates and crushes and then some evil stuff going on. So it's a combination of all those things, kind of the drama of being an adolescent and the coming of age, and also the sort of bigger story that's sort of rumbling underneath.
Gotta say, man, that sounds inspirational, and it sounds something of positivity being spread. So I'm going to check out that book. Actually, I'm going to get it myself. It's on Amazon.com, so why not? I need some motivation right now. Just, recently graduated, looking to do big things. So I think that correlates with, again, talking about that relationship, it kind of connects there, having that correlation there between positivity and having something of your own that you deem as special, and I guess not giving up or letting people's opinion affect you on that, as you said. So,
thank you for buying it. I will add, though, it is for what they call like a middle grade audience, so like 6th, 7th graders, 5th graders, that kind of thing. So you may read it in a day, but I really appreciate the sale, and maybe it'll inspire you. Who knows? And I should mention there's a sequel coming also. There's a sequel coming later this year, so be on the lookout for that too.
Nice. That was actually my next question, so there you go.
There you go.
I got a preview.
Yeah, it'll be out, I think, later in the fall, and it is a sequel to the first one, which is very exciting.
Nice. I definitely got to check both out now. And all right, I guess to wrap things up, I got one more question for you. What advice and suggestions would you have to offer for any graduate or student, such as myself, who has familiar or similar aspirations, that's looking to break into the media industry, whether that's writing, broadcasting, all that stuff? What advice would you give?
Well, it would be the advice that you're currently taking, which is doing the thing that you want to be doing. In my day, not to sound like an old person, but I'm going to, it wasn't as easy to kind of break in because there was, it was early days of the internet, and you could be, I wrote for free, which is, some journalists will say, don't do it. But I think in today's media-rich environment, if you want to be a sports writer, find a place to write about it, kind of hone your skills. Try to get an internship at a place that does the thing that you're passionate about, but mainly do it, and really keep doing it. And that's sort of my advice. There are people who've contacted me who said, "Look, I'm frustrated. I can't get a job out of this." And I say, it stinks, but you got to keep at it. And the best thing about writers is that writers write, and broadcasters broadcast, and just doing your own podcast or doing your own show. That's a great way to do things. Writers, find a place, even just your own blog, and hone your voice and find a way to publish. And eventually, things will turn up because, you'll find your way eventually. And that's kind of general advice there.
Yeah. And no, I don't think it's just general, because having someone with experience always, being able to say that makes everything seem a little bit more relaxing, because I look at it as a thing where, hey, the more somebody's able to talk from experience, the more that's going to drive your passion inside to want to keep going and doing this, which is, what I want to do. But I guess this is a bonus question for you because I just have to ask, man. Did you ever see broadcasting as an alternative for you, as a side thing?
That sometimes there were parts of me that said, wow, man, I'd love to be on the radio, I'd love to do TV. And I've gotten to do video and podcasting things over the years, which has been really great. But I knew that the path for broadcasting was way tougher. I always wanted to be back in New York City. It's where I'm from, but it's also, media capital of the world. But I think, and this is just my own sort of take, and with broadcasting, you need to go somewhere else and kind of work your way back, because that's just how it works. You start out in a small town or a minor league team, sort of paying your dues, and not that I wouldn't pay my dues, but it was sort of different that I don't know if I wanted to be in, Nowheresville somewhere and work my way back. I just thought, maybe if I can make it here, make it anywhere. But I was lucky enough to get an internship at a magazine in New York City, and that kind of helped keep me here. But yeah, there were parts of me that said, it'd be really fun to do radio, but I wasn't sure I wanted to go down that path. And I wasn't trained for it either, I should add.
Well, I think you're pretty awesome, man. Just listening to you talk, I think you could be up for it. Why not, man?
Much appreciated. I really appreciate it. And you're doing a heck of a job here.
Not a problem. All right, and will you be on as a guest once again on this show in the future anytime soon?
Anytime you invite me, I'll be there.
All right, sounds good. There you have it, guys. You've been listening to Charles Curtis. Again, you can read his pieces and features on, is it ftw.usatodaysports.com?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There we go.
I think it's usatoday.com, ftw.usatoday.com. I think that's the correct address.
Right, and you can also follow him on Twitter at @byCharlesCurtis. It was a pleasure to talk to you, man, and do this. And again, I appreciate you having the effort to want to do this today, and I look forward to staying in contact with you.
Oh, same here. Really, really great talking with you, Lucas.
All right, man. Sounds good. As for us, we are signing off. Have a good day, everybody.